You're listening to the Author Inside You podcast, a weekly podcast designed to motivate you to finish writing a book, choose a publisher, and have your work build an audience. Keep listening if you're looking to get propelled into the next chapter of your life. And now, it's the Author Inside You podcast with your host, Leah and Matt Rafferty.
Hello, and welcome to the Author Inside You podcast. I'm Matt Rafferty.
And I'm Leah Rafferty.
Joining us today is Ben Philippe, author of The Field Guide to the North American Teenager. Ben was born in Haiti, raised in Montreal, Canada, and now lives in New York. And in 2013, he won the Tennessee Williams Fiction Contest. Welcome, Ben. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, Ben, you certainly have become the social media star. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience?
I wouldn't say star. I think it's just that I'm on Twitter a lot because I like to vomit every thought I've ever have. And I was lucky enough that the dedication of my first novel, The Field Guide to the North American Teenager, went viral. So now people just say, "Oh, so you're the social media YA author." My editor made me get Instagram. I assure you, I'm not a social media expert by any means.
Well, it still must be fun that it's been picked up, and also that it's nice that your mom gets included in the celebrity.
Oh, yeah, it's been really, really great. I'm not on Facebook anymore, but apparently that's where it first started to go viral. And I got messages from people who are like, "Dude, do you know that this thing has thousands of shares?" And I didn't know that, and then I had to log back in to see that it was happening. Yeah, it was really, really flattering.
Well,
but also it leads to the the imposter syndrome of wow, the most popular thing about my book happens before page one.
Yeah. So maybe we should explain to people who don't understand what we're talking about. So you had a foreword, is that correct? And that's what
yes.
A photo of your foreword went viral. So do you want to tell us what the foreword said and kind of explain it?
Sure. So the foreword to my book is to my mother, Belzy. And I just say, there's a little quip in there about how I would have made a terrible doctor and people would have died because she's an amazing Haitian mom. But I think the goal of many, many amazing Haitian moms is to have a son who becomes a doctor. And me saying I want to be a writer was kind of it quirked an eyebrow for her. So that kind of resonated with people, and they took a couple of different people took photos of the dedication and just posted it online, and it went a little bit viral around the time of the launch, which was very neat.
Right, and I'm sure that helped with book sales.
Yeah, I think it did. It didn't quite upstage the big ones, but yeah, it definitely was a very nice boost to have.
Well, everyone likes something about other people's mothers. So, you're dedicated to your mother, and it's funny how you said about, you'd make a terrible doctor. So, well, what a fun way to enter the book business.
Yeah, at first she was really, really flattered about it, but then when she learned that it had picked up steam, she's like, all these people are going to think I'm so horrible. I never forced you. I bought you a notebook in the 7th grade. But yeah, no, she's been really supportive. It's been really cool.
Great. So let's talk about your writing. When did you decide to write this novel?
This novel came pretty late. Writing as a whole kind of came pretty late for me because for the longest time I didn't know that was a path. I loved reading. I loved books, but you would go into a bookstore, you would pick up books, and you would try to figure out how did this person make a career out of this? How did they put this thing into the world? And it would just say oh, they're a writer, and they've had books published in pushcarts, and they live in New York with 2 cats. That was the extent of the bio.
Right.
So I didn't know it was possible until college. That's where I took my first workshop class, kind of on a whim. And then I kind of fell in love with it. I kept writing, and after that I stuck with the academic path. I was really, really lucky to get this amazing fellowship that was funded for an MFA. So that's when I started to get the idea of writing a full book. But this book actually came a few years later, after I was living in New York City for a while, sort of writing my thesis from grad school didn't really sell. So writing was just something I was doing on the side of having a full-time day job, teaching and being in digital marketing. So it had to be something fun for me. And apparently I'm emotionally stunted enough that a high school drama with sort of, a lot of big young emotions happening at a prom, that was where my heart was. So that's where like the first draft manifested itself.
Great.
All right, so you have this idea of the novel, you write the novel, and now what do you do? And where do you turn?
At that point, I had gotten really good at guessing the email addresses of editors and agents. It's just usually first name, period, last name at agency.com.
Right.
And if you don't know how to word the agency.com part, there's usually a contact for general information on the website. You just take that tail end of it. And sometimes it's just the first letter of the first name and first letter of the last name. So I was basically just like knocking on doors. And I'm sure my introductory email is in a lot of like trash bins and spam folders.
Right.
But yeah, essentially a few people were interested because I always led with the MFA sort of, hey, I have this MFA, I'm a writer, would you be interested? There was a lot of rejection, but some people were interested, and that's sort of when I started to send out the partial for the field guide.
Great. So then when they would write back and say they were interested, then you send them an example, and then how did it turn out that you made an agreement with the publisher?
At that point, I was kind of impatient. I submitted the partial for the book with an outline of the rest, and the partial was like the first 140, 150 pages. And the outline was really detailed, but it was maybe 20-page outline of how the rest of the book would go. And that was enough to sort of get Balzer and Bray's interest, I think, because they knew I was a writer. I had gotten short stories published, won a few prizes. They were like, oh, we can take a chance on an incomplete book.
Great. That's very nice.
So then when you made your contract, what about the editing process? Did you have someone look at your editing prior to sending out your query letter, or did they just take over?
No, before querying with the editor, I ended up with Alessandra. It was self-edited, but then I lucked out because Alessandra Balzer is amazing. Like, their imprint does a lot of books I really personally admire. They did Simon versus the Homo Sapien Agenda. They did The Hate You Give. So I just trusted her fully. And I know it sounds almost like a cliche, but I love my editor. She's very, very good at giving you really brutal feedback in a way that makes you feel good. It's really a superpower. I got a 2-book contract with them. So right now I'm working on my second book. It's not a sequel. It's an original story, but it's also a YA. And I wrote a full draft of it, but I wrote it while I was promoting a field guide. I also still have my day job teaching full time, so
you're busy.
It's not my best work. It was like a little not slapped together, but it just wasn't my best work. And I sent it to her, and then I heard back 3 weeks later. And after like a 20-minute chat, basically, we both agreed that like I should chuck it aside and start from the start again from the top, like keep the story but just rewrite the entire thing. And I remember that it just like took 2 days to sink in. I was like, oh no, actually my editor just told me to like restart a full draft. I felt like really good about it, but like on paper, that's a really sort of like daunting thing that a lot of writers would like bemoan. But in the case of Alessandra, she really frames it as like the best thing that could happen for your story is to sort of just take the space and time you need to start it over.
Well, probably as a teacher also, you know that she has your best interest in heart also.
Yeah, I'm able to tap into that, but also I think I'm more narcissistic writer than a teacher, because it's really just Alessandra. Because sometimes I'll go, I don't do it anymore, but when the book first came out, I used to go on Goodreads and read the reviews, and I would fall into a spiral for like a full afternoon. I'm very much like a paper-skinned first-time author, but Alessandra just has like the magic touch that she can just like get me to toss an entire draft.
Well, that's wonderful. You found someone like that that you trust.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Ben, what are you doing to promote the field guide?
It was The imprint Balzer and Bray is really good at promoting their books. It was one of the Epic Reads books, like the YA behemoth of Epic Reads. So there was a book tour, a small like 6-stop book tour, the week of launching.
How did you like that?
I really liked it. They pair you with like 3 other authors.
Oh, okay.
And they were all second-time authors, and I was the only newbie. And I think they do that so that the attendance at the events isn't like...
Oh, I see, yes.
Null. Mm-hmm. So they're like, come for Maureen Johnson, but, Ben Philippe is also there at the corner of the table. So there were 4 of us. I was the contemporary one. There was a murder mystery. That was Maureen's. And the other 2 were sort of second-time novelists. So I got to see and hang out with people who had been through it before. And it's really amazing because you think it's going to be like a live version of Goodreads where people are going to come up to you and say like, yeah, I don't know who you are, but I read your book and I hated it.
Oh.
But it's actually the opposite because the people who take the time to come to an event or to take the time to read the book, like they really want to talk to you about it.
Sure.
And there are people who had like strong feelings about the main character because he's written to be kind of acerbic, sarcastic, off-putting at times, but that's all part of the character arc. And they're like, even the people who really disliked him, they would stay at the table for like 10, 15 minutes, like talking with me about him. And that's honestly the best thing.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I would think that getting the feedback directly in person from your audience would be fun.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I only have one book out, but it's one of the reasons why I love the YA genre, because the readers are younger for the most part, and they're just like very open about their feelings about works of art, like books. So if they hate something, they'll say it. If they love something, they'll scream it.
That's nice.
You'll get into arguments about Harry Potter houses. It's this whole energetic thing. And I think during my MFA, I really loved my MFA. I loved like being surrounded by super smart people, but it was a lot of like, let's analyze this Tennessee Williams story as a metaphor around the table. And it was a very not dry, but muted level of enthusiasm about what we were doing. We were very much studying the craft. Whereas, like, it's just kids losing their minds over books.
Which is wonderful.
Right, and being excited. What else are you doing to promote the book?
I did the Nova Teen Book Festival.
Oh.
And it's in North Texas, Harlington. And this was, like, the first time that this was just a behemoth. Because the Epic Reads events were just, 20 to maybe 60 people. They're always at bookstores. They're pretty small affairs. But this was like a teen book festival. I think there were 4,000 people.
Wow.
Oh, my gosh.
Over the course of like 3 days. And they were massive fans. They traveled all the way there. They were like strollers and big families.
Oh,
and
gosh.
There were like superstar authors too. Angie Thomas and her new book on the come up was there. And like, I remember in the gymnasium, they lined up all the authors. There were like 20 authors of all levels. Some people were first timers like me. Some were like career writers who had like 10 or 12 different books under their name. Angie was the superstar. Her line, they had to put tape around to get like her book signed. And her line just like zigzagged around all of ours. So we would be done with the signings and we would sort of just be hanging out. And her line would just like keep serpenting around like the entire gym. And she was so nice. She's so happy. But it's also really cool because you get to see like, oh, this is all because someone wrote a book. Someone you really admire wrote a really great book and people came to it. So I think that all feeds into like me wanting to write a second book that like lives up to the title.
So next year you can have a line that long.
Oh God. I'm way less like happily social of a person than Angie Thomas. I think by the end I'll become a full monster diva and have a stamp with my name in it and I'll just stamp every book.
Take my picture next, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's the cool thing that we're trying to speak to people about our podcast is that you have an idea and you don't know where it's going to take you. And there's people out there who could grab onto that idea and you who knows? Like you just said, it's just fun to see where this idea goes if you make it a reality. Don't just keep it into yourself. let it go out there, and then see where it takes you.
Yeah, it's something I've seen also in my life as a teacher, because I teach really cool stuff I'm interested in. I teach adaptation and screenwriting and writing for TV, so stuff that also involves a degree of storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the two things that happen is that writers assume interest, so they'll write about something that's really meaningful to them, and they just assume that everybody's going to sort of enter the work with that same emotional attachment. So someone who's writing about like growing up on a farm with horses
Mm-hmm.
and who loves horses like profoundly doesn't understand that someone is like bored by the concept of horses. So they have, as a writer, you have to do the work of creating that excitement.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing that happens is that people assume disinterest. So they have an idea for a book, but they also have all the voices in their head at the same time who are like, oh, that's such a stupid idea. Like, oh, the world doesn't need like one more story of somebody moving to a
Right.
city. And they just sort of like start beating on themselves. They become their own one-star Goodreads reviews. And I think that's the voice that new writers especially have to put out of their heads. Just write the thing. Just finish the thing. Because I guarantee you, every book out there is one person's favorite book, and not the author. Like one person, one member of their audience. It's like their favorite thing in the world. Keep writing it. Don't just stop yourself short, because you're going to hear no a lot, a whole lot. So you shouldn't be your first no.
Yeah,
Right.
good idea.
That's always
I mean,
the
good-
advice I try to give.
Yeah. And now I'm looking at your webpage, and I have to say I really like your webpage also, especially
Oh, thank you.
your FAQs are funny too. Also.
It just the whole design is
Yeah.
great. I mean, it's just easy going. You know, it doesn't seem overwhelming. You know, sometimes you go to a web page and you're like, I don't know where to begin, or the text is too small, or there's too much here. I feel like too much. Yours is just great.
Shout out to my friend Brittany Reed, who is actually a human being with multiple skills, not just writing. Was like, oh yeah, I can design websites, and she nailed it.
Wow,
Yeah.
she
Wow.
really did a nice job, because
Yeah.
another thing that we speak with authors about is that a lot of authors maybe don't, they're writers, so they don't know about websites, and it's nice that you found someone who could give you
A hand,
yeah,
right? And
yeah,
make it
it's
look great.
Yeah, very, very, very professional. I think very nice.
We spent a lot of time sort of like working on the site, and I started doing Instagram because that was part of the book promotion. And I think for me, at least, I'll speak for myself, I had a little blockage a little bit at first about like, oh, am I just like becoming a hack salesman, just like throwing my book at people? But then I kind of realized that like, no, it's needed.
This episode of the Author Inside You podcast is brought to you by Scribophile. If you're writing a book and you need some help with some professional writers looking over your work, then you need to join Scribophile. Go to scribophile.com and sign up.
One aspect of Scribophile that I really like is a writing academy. It is a free writing resource produced by members of the Scribophile community who are writing professionals.
In the academy, there are some really cool courses that you can click on and learn all about specific types of writing, such as cliches or how to make dialogue flow naturally while writing.
Perhaps you're thinking about writing a screenplay. There's help for you on Scribophile also. One of the articles on the Writing Academy is Common Screenplay Mistakes, how to format a screenplay. And one of my favorites is Correct Semicolon Usage.
If you're writing a book or a screenplay and you'd like some professional help, go to scribophile.com. The best thing about it is it's free to sign up. So go to scribophile.com. Well, Ben, tell us about the book cover. I see the photo on your webpage, and it's sort of like how would you describe that? Bound on the side, or like a spiral bound?
Yeah, it's actually, they talked about making it an actual sort of spiral book, but in the end, I think they just went with the photo of a spiral notebook on the cover of a regular book, which I think,
Oh, now I see it. Yes, okay.
yeah, the gray background is part of it too.
Yes,
I get
sorry.
it. Okay.
That's cool.
It's all part of the gimmick of the story, because the premise of the Field Guide to the North American Teenager is the story of Norris Kaplan. He's a black French-Canadian from Montreal who has to move to the middle of Austin, Texas in the middle of the school year, and he truly hates it there. He has massive culture shock, and he's thrown from a really small high school, small like 30-person graduating class high school.
Yeah, I guess so.
To like the massive American megaplex high schools with graduating classes of 3,000 people. And he just starts like documenting the wild life of the American high school and sort of placing labels on everyone he meets, the jocks, cheerleaders, loners, weird art kids. And he accidentally starts like the slam book of his school by just like writing about the people around him.
Oh, very cool. Well, the cover's very interesting. I really like the cover.
Yeah, the yellow is supposed to be like the notebook from the story that he actually keeps and doodles in all the time. I had nothing to do with it. We talked about the concept of like, since Norris keeps a notebook, the cover should involve a notebook. I was like, yeah, that sounds really cool. And then they sent me the first mock-up, and I loved it. And then I was just wondering, like, oh, am I just like too grateful and too happy to be published that they could have just sent me like anything, and I would have said, yeah, I love it. But I generally did think it captured like something about the mind of a high schooler who hates high school, who just scribbles on everything.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it was like the first version of the cover, and they kind of nailed it.
Where can people find your book? Where is it for sale?
A little everywhere. It was picked by Target and Barnes & Noble, if
Great.
you like those big retailers. Yeah, the book is available everywhere, and in small bookstores, which I'm a big fan of. So even if it's a little more expensive there, support the happy, shiny book people.
Mm-hmm. The best way for our listeners to get in touch with you, Ben?
Well, there's my website, which you've been very kind about. They can email me directly from there. And also, I'm on Twitter, literally almost 24/7, just vomiting my thoughts, deleting them when I feel like they're lame, and, having a lot of emotions about Game of Thrones.
Oh, okay.
Excellent.
So at Go Home Ben, all one word, on Twitter.
Okay, great. So we'll put links to your Twitter account and to your webpage on our show notes, so people can follow you and get in touch with you if they'd like.
Well, Ben was a great guest. He certainly has a lot of enthusiasm.
He sure does. And if you're enthusiastic about any of our interviews, we invite you to subscribe to the Author Inside You podcast on your favorite podcast player. And until next time,
Right on.
Thank you for listening to the Author Inside You podcast with your host, Leah and Matt Rafferty.